it's time to do something else with the toggle tracking method. We actually want to record the number of hours that the user has worked in the different projects. We're going to start by going to our initial init method where we define these default projects. We're also going to add now an empty array for the records. So a record will contain a project and the starting time, the ending time, and how many hours that all was. So in order to get that done, we are adding some new methods here. Where we created a method that's get project by ID. It basically receives an ID of a project. It iterates through the project's array, and when there's a match, it returns the corresponding project. For instance, if the ID was 2, it will return this object. And the second method that we need in order to move on is get next record ID, which works the same way as get next project ID. Basically, if there are known records, it's just gonna return 0 as the first ID, and if there are more, it will return the largest one plus 1. Okay, so let's go to toggle tracking. If we start the tracking time, we want to keep some record of that. And then when we stop tracking time, we'll do other things. So first, when we begin tracking time, the first thing we want to do is get the project that we selected, get the project ID by selecting the drop down and getting its value. Selecting a project is compulsory. If there are projects, it will show the top one by default. But if you deleted all the projects, we need to show the user a message saying that if there's no project, they need to select one. They basically need to create one in settings, and we're not tracking time. If they actually selected one, if it's all good, we want to store that project in our ztiempo object, so that we later on can know at what time we started, like what was the project that we were tracking, and so forth. Get project by ID is the method that I created here, so we're using it now, and we record the starting time. This is a JavaScript date time constructor. Now, when I stop the timer, I want to get the time at that point, right? I want to get the ending time, and I want to create a new record because we've completed the whole, like we've started tracking, we finished tracking, so now we want to store the amount of time that I worked on that particular project. And that's very simple. I'm just pushing a new object into the records array that we just created up here. We're pushing a new object that contains a new ID, which is generated by this method, an ID for the record, not for the project. We store the actual project, the whole object. We store the starting time, the ending time, and also we will calculate and store right away the number of hours, which this mathematical formula will do for us. And well, let's make sure it works. So we're going to use the console and show the records object. Let's reload our page. I begin tracking and then I stop tracking. See, I have one element in my objects array. It has the ending time, the starting time, the number of hours that was, not much, obviously, an ID which is 0 to begin with. I can pick a different project now and begin tracking again. Stop the tracking, and now my records array has two elements, the previous one, the same one as before, plus a new one which has this new the different project that I tracked. That's how we're going to be storing our records entries, and which we'll later on use to generate a report and to list back to the user, because a time tracking app where you cannot see how much time you've worked is pretty much worthless. Okay, so just to summarize, what we did was basically get the status of the tracking. If we are tracking, then we want to keep track of which project it is that we are tracking and when we started. And well, that also we need to check that a project was actually selected because it's a compulsory field. When we stop the timer, we want to save that record. We want to save the starting time, the ending time. We want to get the number of hours. In theory, you could just calculate the number of hours at any point with the starting time and ending time, so there's a redundancy there, but I prefer doing it like that because then I don't have to worry about it. We just have it stored and that's it. And we store, of course, which project it is that we've been tracking, and we give it a unique ID, which we'll use later on to select, to delete. And we created a couple of helper methods, a method to get the project by ID and one to get the record by ID. To get the next record.